Tēnā koutou katoa. It's always a bit of a challenge following one of my many ministers. I've got 5 actually, to make sure all our facts are lined up. I can probably inform you that my facts are probably slightly more up to date than my minister, so hopefully that will be okay. As you understand, Crown Infrastructure are involved. We're effectively the infrastructure funding arm of the government, so effectively funding communications and roading and water for urban expansion as well. So I think, let's have a look, here we go. So this is what when we talk around in New Zealand today, this is what most people would like to see. They'd like to see their fixed broadband speeds nudging up to a gigabit. Everybody wants to have a gigabit. I've got some at home, and really fast mobile speeds as well. You can get faster mobile speeds than that. But mainly because I actually took that mobile speed screenshot actually just a little bit south of Kirikiri, outside the Aramahori Marae, so we knew what sort of speed it was when we could actually connect. So it's actually quite good speed for rural New Zealand. But unfortunately, as many of you will know, and Andrew Hoggard, who I see down the back there, will know quite well, that's not exactly what we see in rural New Zealand. So here's a house here, not too far from here, in Wairarapa. It's actually on a farm. As you can see, there's no fibre, no copper, no VDSL, no wireless, basically nothing. They probably have PSTN on copper if they're lucky, might have dial-up, might have a satellite internet service. So that's the sort of challenge that we actually have in rural New Zealand. You can see there's not many houses around there. It's not very dense. Typical sort of rural New Zealand in a valley, always challenging to connect. The good news about this household here is they will be connected under the program. They'll actually be connected by Wiz Wireless, our partner in Wairarapa. So they'll be very excited when they actually do get connected out there. And I think the other thing is, this is actually from the rural broadband map. Andrew from Internet New Zealand, I think he's here somewhere. I know there's some Internet New Zealand people here. It's a great tool to use for people in rural New Zealand to find out what their connectivity status is. Most of the houses and the farms in the first round have been loaded onto this program now. So actually when you go in there, this is actually an expansion one. It will actually pop up and say when you're actually going to get connected. Some people would obviously like that sooner. Unfortunately, we're not going to get them all connected before the Rugby World Cup. So what could a rural household sort of expect? Here's a real life example here. Anybody from Primo Wireless here? Primo Wireless Taranaki, one of our partners. Great partner up here. Here's a fantastic site here. You can sort of see Mount Taranaki in the background. This is actually a real screenshot from the farm and actually the house off their home Wi-Fi, 51/20. That's sort of like the entry sort of urban UFB speed, but this is in rural New Zealand, literally in the middle of nowhere. You can see the little repeater that sits on their roof. So this is the sort of speeds that we're aiming at. So it's going from nothing to 50. We're not going to get to a gigabit initially, but we're obviously trying to just lift those speeds up to at least what we're seeing elsewhere. Of course, in Australia, they'd actually regard that as a high speed in urban Sydney. Always have to dig at our Australian friends. What do the overall broadband programs look like in New Zealand? Well, the Minister sort of outlined this. UFB now has actually hit 75% of the population. That was the original target to be done by 31st of December 2019. We managed to hit that 9 months early thanks to our 4 partners, Chorus, North Power, Naval and UFF, all running ahead of plan, and we did the expansion program as well. About 11% still to build, and that's getting built reasonably rapidly. Minister mentioned the first RBI program was about 9% of population, and the expansion, which we're driving now, is the last 4%. So they gave us all the hard ones at the end to sort of focus on. The program, we have do a lot of GIS in Crown Infrastructure for all of our various programs. Every green dot there represents a rural farmhouse that is currently getting less than 20 megabits per second, most of them less than 5 megabits per second. You can't see all the detail here. This is a busy map, but it does actually show all the 1,400 kilometres of highway we get covered and 160 tourism sites that are covered, including actually the challenge of covering 4 of our islands as well, being Great Barrier, Chatham's, Waiheke, which actually has fibre, and Stewart as well. There are a few other islands popping up, like Pitt Island off Chatham's there, which we're going to have a challenge improving their broadband. But that's a sort of just a scale. It literally is from Kaitaia and you can't say Bluff, it's Kaitaia to Stewart Island out to the Chatham. So it's a very challenging, widespread program. It's about 84,000 households and businesses will be covered in the program. As I said, you can see the numbers up there. It's about 3.5% of population, be about 570 cell towers roughly built, along with too many numerous dimension WISP towers around the country. I think they'll be probably in the thousands. 17 partners, as Minister talked about, from WISPs, and the WISPs are exceptionally good at getting into these tight, difficult rural households, up valleys, over the back of hills, etc. So we're very pleased to have them. They're represented right throughout the country. And of course, RCG, which is a sort of a global first, a joint venture between the three mobile operators up there. That's a fantastic picture there of Amuri, one of the Amuri net sites. Chris, who's our partner there, he takes fantastic photos up there of Canterbury. We always love receiving his photos. And as you can see, a few solar panels there as well. And this is just the sort of shape of what the program's going to look like as it rolls out. It's going to be, the broadband aspect is going to be substantially complete by 2021. That's a challenging target, substantially. We're talking about 90%. The mobile black spot program takes a bit longer. The major reason behind that is just more challenging to build. We're having to build towers, for example, in places like Doubtful Sound, if anybody who's been to Doubtful Sound. These are challenging places throughout New Zealand, into Milford. A lot of these areas don't even have power, let alone backhaul, let alone anything else. So that does present some challenges. The state highways are very important to get covered as well, and the rural broadband users are being rolled out. It is a combination of basically some commercial coverage, which we managed to do through the mobile operators and some WISPs who are actually building it without any Crown funding, quite a lot of WISP expansion, and obviously through RCG as well. Here's the progress to date. Luckily, these numbers do fact check with what the Minister said, which we made 100% sure they did. This was in the quarterly release. So the rural broadband program is about 40% complete. A substantive portion of that is actually the commercial coverage that we did when we signed the contract. So we did a deal with the mobile operators that they would actually upgrade a number of their 3G towers to 4G. And also there's a couple of WISPs there doing some commercial expansion as well. And along with quite a lot of those numbers in there actually include some WISP build out as well. I think Mike will talk about how much they've done. I think about 3,000 in that number there is actually new WISP build, about 166 kilometres of state highway, about 19 tourist sites. Unfortunately, we haven't covered the large kauri tree up north yet. And there's another little WISP site there, Lightwire site in the Pukahina, if anybody's been there, in the Bay of Plenty. Now, RCG, Andrew Button's going to talk to you more about RCG later on, so I won't really steal his thunder. The unique thing that we're really pleased with from a government perspective is we're bringing the three operators together onto a single tower footprint using single antennas, single radios, which are software upgradable from your 3, 4 to 5G type levels, common backhaul back. So that's a much more efficient build. And when we're building in these remote areas in New Zealand, that was very important to get done. We've been very impressed with how the three mobile operators have been cooperating. I think when we actually signed the contract, Russell Stanners, who was then the CEO of Vodafone, I said, Russell, when was the last time you guys, all three of you, signed a contract? And he said, this is the first. So this is world-breaking stuff, getting a whole industry to share spectrum. Out there, these towers will be 4x4 MIMO, which is quite technical, which means it's basically 4 receive, 4 send transmitters. That means there is a lot of capacity, 175 megahertz of spectrum. That basically, the three operators are tossing all of their rural spectrum into this. So these will have the highest level of spectrum and the most efficient radios with the lowest density. So there'll be plenty of capacity on these towers going forward. Right. So one of the key challenges we had early on, and Haast has always sort of come up on our radar, there's landslips down there, a number of things, is this is a challenging area of the country, 240 kilometre of black spot. I think when I drove down there recently, a little while ago actually with Andrew, when we actually got the first tower up there, text to my wife and I left Fox to say I'll call you in 2 days, because it was essentially, you actually went down there and you go to a local pub and people were conversing. There was no Facebook, there was no Tinder, didn't know what it was. People complained about their phones because they always ran out of battery. I never remember their PIN on their phone because they only used it when they went into Wanaka. But this is a big area. About 1 million tourists travel this road a year. 90% of those are international. A significant accident area, particularly from Haas to the Haas Gate, about 80 accidents a year. Currently what they have to do there, they're all volunteers. As somebody has an accident on the road, they flag down another camper van, they drive into Haas, and they find somebody to drive around town to try and find the volunteer ambulance, volunteer fire, police to actually go out there and rescue people. So it's a really challenging environment. So one of the things we did there is put the cell tower into Haas. Now that's made an immediate improvement. So now when there's an accident on the highway, they can actually go in there and use the cell phone within the town to actually contact the emergency services. So this is key. This is a big area of investment for the government. We're putting in just under $50 million of connectivity expenditure into the Haas highway. That includes a fibre link. So we'll finally have a ring around the west coast, up to 19 cell towers. There will be some UFB probably going to a couple of small towns along there as well. So the key things that this will do for us from an emergency services perspective, give widespread access to 111, emergency caller location, and broadcast emergency text. You can see some examples on the side there. So when the Haas highway is closed, we lose another bridge or we have another slip, people can get a text before they drive all the way there, 200 kilometres, and then have to turn around and drive all the way back again. The sole charge policeman down there, Paul Gurney, saying there's a lot of accidents are happening. It's a hard country and it can take an hour to get word out about an accident. Some of those pictures there are some of the little temp towers we've actually put along there. These do about 1 kilometre, one at Bruce Bay, Wilderness Lodge, and at Roaring Billy. So these are effectively hotspots for emergency services. See, there's been a lot of traffic stopping in Haas. Andrew might be able to tell you how I think the cell tower keeps maxing out there. It's only a 3G tower. It's not designed for a lot of data, but people seem to be downloading everything. And I had a recent crash on the Haas Highway Bridge, just coming into there. And they got a emergency services call from somebody on the camper van. They were there within 5 to 10 minutes. The camper van had actually blown over, was tipped over on the edge of the bridge. So this does have significant benefits of getting out there from a public safety and government perspective. Right. Another key focus of the Mobile Black Spot program is tourism. And most people know Milford. Who's been to Milford? People in Milford. It's a fantastic location, iconic tourism. Again, 90% of the visitors there are international, just nearing 1 million visitors a year. So this is another challenging area that we were tasked to do. So one of the plans here is to actually put a fibre link into Milford as well. There's a lot of connectivity required in Milford. At the moment, there is very little. And also putting a number of mobile towers along this route to actually provide mobile black spot coverage for emergency services and also for some of the iconic tourism experiences. People actually do like taking Instagrams of our scenery, posting it on the internet, and it encourages more visitors to come. So it improves the overall tourism experience for people, and tourism is our largest industry in New Zealand. It is 6% of GDP. 3.8 million international visitors a year and growing. So these are going to improve our tourism experiences in New Zealand and is a key focus of this government. Right, it was mentioned that the PGF, the Provincial Growth Fund, is funding the Digital Marae Connectivity Program. The Minister mentioned this, and this was announced by Minister Jones, or Mātua Shane, as he prefers to be known, in Waitangi this year. 112 applications have already been received. 57 are in progress, and we're releasing an RFP for the core service providers to provide this in the marketplace. But 812 maraes are currently eligible through TPK. I'm going to have a shot at my poor Te Reo and actually pronouncing some of those that are actually currently connected. We actually have currently 7 connected. So Aramahoe, which is up in the south of Kerikeri, Te Hoanga and Kaipara, Waiuru in Opotiki. The interesting one here is Gisborne connected this marae. It had no connectivity, and part of the connectivity there, we actually had to Gisborne install a tower on the local hill, which was actually on iwi land. So a real success there. Ipipiti in Wairoa, Hinemihi in Wairoa, Mahanga in Wairoa, and Ruapanga in Wairoa as well. We actually have 2 marae actually connected to a gigabit UFB as well. So that's an astonishing sort of thing. So we've seen this roll out. We're very excited about this program. We've got one of our engineers is running it, David Aratiri. He's a Ngāti Porou fella. That doesn't necessarily reflect that there's a few Ngāti Porou marae in the early connections. We are getting a widespread interest throughout New Zealand. The Minister did talk about what is left. This is always a challenging task. We think there's about 4,000 rural households left. Every time we keep looking at this number, some of them seem to be covered. Sometimes they don't actually exist. And we're going through that data. The largest areas which still have some gaps are Northland, Bay of Plenty, and north of the Waikato. Sort of mid-sized areas, bits around rural Auckland, Taranaki, what we call the top of the south, Marlborough Sounds, wouldn't surprise you, a bit around Tasman. Some in the hinterlands of the Canterbury, a bit around Otago and Southland. However, Gisborne or Tairāwhiti will be fully covered with our partners RCG and GisborneNet. Manawatu with InspireNet and RCG right through there. I think there's only about 10 end users not covered. West Coast, Wi-Fi Connect, Zealand and RCG. And Wellington, when we're talking about Wellington, we're really talking about the Wairarapa. Wiz Wireless going to do a great job there, supplemented with some mobile coverage. One of the big things, another key government focus is, and if Minister O'Connor was here, he would talk a lot about this, is rural health. So getting increased connectivity out there to rural households is very important for rural health. It allows some remote monitoring, and also diagnostics to go back to the doctors. Also, it provides an immense benefit for district nurses. They find greater security when they got mobile coverage when they're travelling on these remote roads throughout New Zealand. So this is an additional sort of benefit, and this is another key driver why the government is actually funding in this area. Let's make sure I'm going okay for town. IoT solutions. Again, when we look at agriculture in New Zealand, it's basically about 40% of our exports. I hope Andrew, these numbers are right. He can correct me if they're not. 4 to 5, near around 5% of GDP when you include forestry as well. So over half of our land mass is dedicated to agriculture in New Zealand. So the Internet of Things is a key area for productivity in the sector. If you go to Europe, they're going to use a lot of the Internet of Things, 5G, etc. In a BMW factory, in a large Siemens factory, industrial automation. In New Zealand, our big industry is agriculture. So we see a big benefit in this area through these networks. So roughly we've got about 48% coverage today of NB-IoT. So that's the one that runs off the cell sites, and obviously there's the LoRa, etc., which can connect into the WISP networks. By the time we're finished, that'll reach to about 70% of landmass. Now, when you think about that, it's a significant achievement. There's about 30% of landmass in New Zealand is actually dock land or national parks. So effectively, almost all the arable land will have a form of IoT coverage. So the platform will be there for the sector to go. And I was up at Mystery Creek just last week, and you can actually start to see there IoT starting to emerge in the sector. Probably not as much as I would have thought. Still a lot of tractors and fences and things like that going on up there. But you are actually seeing it up there. So 2 examples of this is harvest.com. They're a IoT provider out there. You can put sensors on your irrigation, on your feeder tanks, on your remote fences, wind and weather. They have about 9,000 units currently deployed in New Zealand. They run at about 100 dB minus, so they actually get an extended range. Farm IQ was started off as a joint venture with MPI. They're a software farm management tool for livestock and dairy farms. Over 10,000 users throughout New Zealand now. So these things are starting to pick up, but you do need the basic connectivity layer for these productivity tools to actually exist. Without that none of these things will actually work. Right, I'll just a little bit touch on UFB. UFB is an urban initiative, but I'd have to say is the expansion is really a rural initiative. It's focusing on a lot of rural towns throughout New Zealand, a significant number, including who's been to Onga Onga? Who knows where Onga Onga is? Anybody? There's a few people been to Onga Onga. So Onga Onga, a very small town in Lower Hawke's Bay there, about 50 to 60 households. That's how small we're actually getting. And that connectivity into a rural town will actually act as an anchor point for that community that actually assists with education as well. And it also provides a network hub to actually extend the rural network. So it actually helps us deploy in fibre deeper and deeper. There's currently 68 towns under current build in the UFB expansion, and 45 have already been completed. You might not be able to read all that list there, but there are a lot of towns being completed there. There's probably another couple of hundred to go after this as well. So there's a lot of towns being built there throughout New Zealand, and we're very pleased with the progress of this initiative. Now, the real interesting thing here is, if the slide can come up, is uptake. So, we're at about 52% odd in the main UFB initiative. Places like Hamilton are a bit over 60%, Waiuku. But you can see here is Waipu. Who's been to Waipu? A few people been to Waipu? That's good. It's always it's also a good lesson to know what is geography in New Zealand. Just south of Whangarei, just nudging 60% after 17 months. Horatu, just north of Hamilton. Longburn, if people know who knows Longburn. Freezing Works, just outside Palmerston North. So again, a very small rural town, about 150 homes there. We've seen very, very rapid uptake here. The key drivers behind this, we think, is some of the underlying copper broadband probably wasn't at the standard that some of us were used to in the major centres. And all of a sudden, of course, with UFB, there's a lot of competition. Traditionally, there's probably 2 or 3 operators selling services in these towns. So traditional sort of ADSL/VDSL/retailers. Now there's multiple operators. Significant offers as well. And there's also a much stronger word of mouth in these small towns. There's always a strong community. So we're seeing very strong uptake. There's really no correlation with income or length of time, but it is much stronger than we actually thought would actually be achieving at this stage. We're very pleased with how this is travelling. There's a few happy snaps. I think others will be showing happy snaps. So here's one of the mobile towers going up. If you've got a fear of heights, don't become a rigger on a mobile tower. That would be my advice. Good health and safety there, which we always like to see. Here's another big mobile site going in here, this time with a crane rather than actually the rigger going to a place that's just north of Auckland there. A nice little concrete pad there as well to actually get it in. And now we'll just do a quick tiki tour of some WISP towers. So it's Gisborne. This one here on your left is actually the tower we put into service at Marae we talked about in Opotiki. So it's actually on iwi land. A Zealander down the west coast of New Zealand are actually mainly doing in Bulla and some of the Grey district. AmuriNet, Chris, he's doing sort of North Canterbury. NZ Technology Group, they're in the Hawke's Bay. You see most of the WISP towers are a bit smaller and are largely all solar. Lightwire, Bay Plenty type area into the Waikato. AmuriNet, another, he always sneaks in a few extra photos. Another shot in Canterbury there. Here we go, one of the large Primo towers in Taranaki. UBB, this is one of Mike's towers. He'll be probably have a few photos himself later on. See, some of these towers, most of these are all new and some of them are very substantive. Unifone down in Central Otago. AONet's got the challenge. They took on building the King Country out. It's a very key area in New Zealand and a very rugged terrain to actually build a core network in. Wiz Wireless out in the Wairarapa. We got one in here for Wi-Fi Connect as well, who are basically building, as was mentioned, the bottom of the South Island on the west coast there, and also decided to have a bit of challenge and going from the Uruwears into the back of Whakatane as well. Some very challenging sort of terrain. So that's sort of roughly a quick run through of the program. Overall, it's a very large program. We're very pleased with the 18 partners we have at the moment. We're seeing a lot of traction out there. People do want this thing to happen faster, but it does take a while to build the infrastructure. Unfortunately, it just doesn't happen overnight, but it has been built at a reasonably rapid rate.